And those guys are never the champion. They don't have the world record totals. They don't win. And they don't win because, they put all this effort into being excellent or the best at one lift are not as good in the other two. And, ultimately that takes away from the total. And ultimately they might place, yes, they might rank high, yes, but they won't usually be the best. It's extremely rare.
I think maybe a good place to start is hybrid. Could you kind of give an overview of your expertise and your background so that way Ashton has like a better idea of where your questions are coming from, like the
Okay,
context?
yeah. So a lot of coaches do what I do, which is mostly strength and conditioning, sports performance-based stuff. A lot of them started with powerlifting or lifting. They were gym rats first, or they at least were an athlete that really focused on the gym. That's where they excelled and not necessarily on the field, to be honest. So they kind of start applying things that work for powerlifting and things that work for gym rats, and then trying to kind of like fit a square peg in a circular hole with a lot of athletes. It can work, but I've found that it is not always ideal. And I kind of came up to it in martial arts, boxing, kickboxing, wrestling, jiu-jitsu. I competed in kickboxing for a long time. I kind of put the sport first, and lifting and strength and conditioning was supplemental to that. And I think I just really found a good system of thought, a good system of application, and a lot of personal experience where it's like I came from the actual competitive martial artist background as my like overwhelming primary focus, and finding where lifting and strength work really truly complemented it rather than detracted from it. I think just me actually coming from that real background rather than strength and conditioning being my primary background, despite that being what I've been doing pretty intensely for about 10 years, I think that has just made my system a little bit more aware of a lot of mechanics that you don't have to worry about for bodybuilders and powerlifters as much. A lot of different nuances in the way a holistic training schedule will affect somebody, and multiple factors that aren't usually trained in typical strength athletes programs. So I just have a little bit of a spin on things when it comes to talking about the weightlifting stuff that comes from a slightly different angle than most powerlifters. Obviously, I really respect powerlifting, and a lot of this stuff also applies to powerlifting as well, in my opinion. And I, on the side of that, is because combat athletes and a lot of athletes have so many injuries, I got pretty damn good at managing a lot of stuff, specifically with shoulders, lower back, and the lower leg as well. So that's typically what I do. I basically coach a lot of recreational, professional, or amateur athletes in terms of returning to performance if something's holding them back or peaking their performance for competition.
Ashton, I know you do a lot of the rucking and other cardiovascular stuff. Like what would you say you're best at as far as your cardiovascular stuff? And the reason why I'm asking is because I'm curious to see what hybrid thinks like would help with the transition to CrossFit at a later time, and like what skills you would be wanting to pick up and stuff. That I'm curious about that.
Well, to answer your question, I would say the best cardiovascular event for me personally at this moment would probably be rucking, just because I have a lot more body mass than I used to with running. It's a lot easier when you're 205 pounds versus when you're like 235 pounds. I still run fine and I can still do it and do it, totally functional. It's just a lot more difficult to be as proficient at it because of just the overall sort of increase of, just force impact from running. So when I ruck, it's kind of mitigated. I carry more weight, but I'm usually not running while I'm rucking. Most of the time I'm walking at a pretty fast pace, and I can do that for much longer than, I can run comfortably. So right at this moment, that's probably the event that I would prefer over the others. Get the most bang for your buck.
In your training, obviously with like the main movements, you're taking a lot of rest in between sets. With your accessory movements, do you ever stack them together into supersets or trisets, or do something to kind of specifically work on like work capacity while training?
Yeah, sometimes. I usually, even on the main lifts, I don't really take really long rest breaks, to be honest. Like I'll work up to like, a 750-pound squat in like 15 minutes. I'm just used to it. For most accessories, the rest time will usually be about less than 5 minutes, usually like 3 minutes or so on average, I would say. A lot of times, this will sound kind of funny, but if I see like 3 sets of 12, I hate 3 sets of 12. Like I would rather just do 1 set of 50 and make it really difficult and just add weight each week.
Yeah.
So for some exercises, I actually do that when I do like weighted core exercises throughout the week, or some of the other smaller leg exercises like leg extension and leg curl and stuff like that. I'll usually combine those into one extremely difficult set. But then there's other accessory movements that I'll actually keep broken up across multiple sets because I'll probably be doing a lot more weight on them.
Howard, what are you curious about with Ashton's training?
Well, I guess I don't know his plans on what he wants to do with or in CrossFit. How long has he been how long have you been preparing for that, and what exactly are you working on at the moment? Because I remember like last year, if correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you broke a deadlift record last year. Is that right?
Yeah, among a few others, yes.
Yeah. So I remember watching the deadlift one. Do you feel like you peaked for that fairly well? And are you trying to maintain somewhat similar numbers as you transition to CrossFit, or you really want to make like the full transition and compete in CrossFit? Or is it more like a hobbyist type thing?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Well, I mean, I'm not actively transitioning to CrossFit right now. I'm still emptying the tank, competing at sort of a higher level in powerlifting. So if I like try to, do a lot to make that transition now, it would definitely kill a lot of the numbers that I've been hitting lately, which, I've been getting a lot stronger in the last couple of months than really ever. But as far as, when I actually do make that transition, assuming I still want to do CrossFit and everything like that in the next, 3 to 4 years from now, I'm not really particularly worried about, how high my one rep maxes would be in CrossFit. As far as I understand, a lot of the records for those lifts anyway aren't particularly high. And, even if I drop 30 pounds, run every day, ruck every day, do whatever, those are all numbers that I can still beat. So for me, even if my max goes down and I'm not deadlifting 850, 900 pounds, it's fine. That's kind of a different style and system of training anyway, right? To maximize your absolute strength versus lifting a decent amount of weight, but also doing a whole lot of other things. And, I understand that maintaining an 850 and 900 deadlift might be really difficult if I trim down 25 pounds and do a whole lot of other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's not quite feasible. I mean, deadlift actually of the big three will probably take the smallest hit. Squat will probably take a moderate hit. I've always been a pretty proficient squatter, and then bench, as long as it's over 400, it's fine. So.
Yeah, as long as you can flex that in the gym.
Yeah, but I mean, in terms of maintaining the absolute strength sort of levels and peak that I reach in powerlifting, I'm not particularly concerned with maintaining that in CrossFit. It won't be necessary, and I would definitely lose from my overall CrossFit performance, I would bet, if I tried to maintain that sort of top end strength for all the three lifts, no doubt.
I've made this joke on social media before. I've talked about like my overall philosophy, and I talk about what like being a hybrid athlete and what hybrid training to me really means. I went through a period when I was younger. I was like, I think I'm so smart or whatever. And then I kind of have a moment of realization where I'm like, all I invented in terms of a philosophy was CrossFit, right? Like I was like, I just took like the longest back roads just to come into the idea where I'm like, basically what I'm advocating for is CrossFit. The idea is instead of being the absolute best at a single thing, usually the best physical fitness and performance outcomes come from being B to A minus in many things rather than like an A plus in a single thing. Because once you push that singular quality to its absolute limits, other things tend to suffer much more disproportionately. And often there's like an orthopedic cost as well, whether that's being the strongest person in the world or maybe the best marathon runner. So I do find that people tend to, once they peak in a certain area, sometimes if they're interested, it can be a really good thing to try and maintain as much as you can in that territory while really giving some volume and effort into developing other qualities. And people usually settle. Naturally, talent and bias effects going on where some people might just naturally be better at one thing than another to some extent, but you usually settle pretty comfortably in an area where you're very happy with your performance in a lot of different things. And people also tend to feel the best in that capacity as well, because you can pretty much do everything better than 99% of people, even if there's a few people in the world that specialize in one area that are going to beat you.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny you say that. You see the same thing in powerlifting sometimes. And Peyton probably knows what I'm talking about with this. Like, it's just on much more of a micro level than something like CrossFit, right? Because powerlifting, only has 3 lifts. Yeah. There are lifters and people that specialize in one lift, and those guys are never the champion. They don't have the world record totals. They don't win, and they don't win because they put all this effort into being excellent or the best at one lift, are not as good in the other two, and ultimately that takes away from the total. And ultimately, they might place, yes, they might rank high, yes, but they won't usually be the best. It's extremely rare that you see, say, like a bench press specialist be the number 1 ranked in a weight class, because for most people, a lot of your total comes from squat and deadlift anyway, right? Because those two are, for most people, going to be higher than your bench press, for instance, just kind of as an example. But yeah, I mean, you see that same thing, that same phenomenon in powerlifting. And for me, my focus right now is, generally speaking, the total record, not even the individual records. And I have the total record right now.
Maybe you've done this differently at different points throughout your career, but because I'm a big fan of top sets myself, even for athletes, how do you